Good morning, I'm Gonzalo Gallotti. I'm a member of the GeneXus development team, and today I will talk about updated applications. They are updated on the spot, instantaneously. So what comes to your mind when I say instantaneous? Can you think of any application that you use on a daily basis?
When I mention this concept, well, let me tell you that I can think of 3 examples of very successful applications that we use on a daily basis. First, probably many of you know this. This is the homepage of Twitter. What I want to point out here is that Twitter continuously maintains an updated view of the client. So, both this trend part in Twitter as the new tweets that I haven't read yet are immediately updated without any interaction from the user. Another clear example is the case of Gmail. Here you can have the inbox open in your navigator on the background, but Gmail continuously checks new mails, and based on that, it organizes our inbox automatically. Finally, and this is probably a very well-known case, the Facebook wall. Here we have all the comments, and you can remain with the open page, and the wall comments are automatically updated without the need for the user to refresh the page. So why am I showing these 3 examples? For 3 reasons. First, because in these 3 examples, the user view is constantly maintained and updated, so data can be seen on real time. These would seem to be essential features for any application. No one can imagine to have to manually refresh the page in any case of these. And finally, and maybe the most interesting thing for us, is that none of these features can be solved simply today, neither with GeneXus nor with any other available tool. So, which is the problem that we have? Why can we not solve this? If I have a client that comes to my application, at that moment he's seeing the view of the data I have. Then there's a certain event in the server, something that's not related to my client, that modifies the data that the user is seeing. From that moment on, the user is seeing an outdated data view. So I would like the user, the server, to notify the client that he is not seeing the latest data, so that he needs to refresh. But for this, we need to be able to reverse the dialogue between the application and the client, so that the server can communicate directly with the client and thus notify of the changes that have taken place at that moment. So what do we propose for GeneXus Stilo? After this presentation, I would like you to know that you'll be able to create new applications to solve more complex scenarios, also to create much more interactive applications that we will see further on, and most importantly, to improve the UX in our applications. Now we shall see 3 main things. 1, scenarios, that is, what do I want this for? Why am I giving this presentation today? 2, implementation, how we're going to develop this at an internal level in GeneXus. And finally, how you will be using it in GeneXus. So, in terms of the scenarios, scenario number 1 is real-time data. I brought an example here. Just imagine a company that has vehicles which are equipped with GPS units. What these GPS units do is that they report their geographical location at certain intervals. In my company, I have a monitoring center where I see the position of an application. The application shows the real-time location of my units, but I would like the position of my units to be viewed on real-time, and that I don't need to refresh or update the page manually at certain time intervals. I would like my application to be refreshed when we have data. Another similar case, and this is an application of tickets for the movies. The important thing is that here we need to book a seat in the theater. And when I see this, the theater screen is showing all the seats that are available, so I can see how many the seat availability. I would like this to be reported to me on real time. That is to say, if someone else at the same time has opened that page, and if I took too long in choosing my seat and someone else from another terminal chose a seat that I might be choosing afterwards, I want this to be avoided because someone else's action from another application also impacts on myself. There are other applications such as Dropbox, the Facebook chat, where we use these techniques very much in terms of showing real-time data. And this gives us a hint in terms of how these needs are no longer a luxury but a requirement. In terms of scenario number 2, which is another scenario that we detected, which is to trigger client events. Besides from wanting to see real-time data, I want to be able to take actions in terms of the client. Here we have an interesting application for hotel room reservations. And the interesting thing about this application is that when I logged on to see a room, after a couple of seconds, a message appeared. There are more than 10 users taking a look at this. Hurry up. Then I left it, and when I came back, I found another message that said, there are only 2 rooms left in this hotel. So the application was reporting about all the updates in the application without my having to do anything. I believe that this is very useful for improving your sales. I'm showing this because it is a very interesting example of a scenario where, based on things that are happening in my application which are alien to the client, the application triggers the event in the navigator, in the client. In this case, these are messages, but it could be to take me back to another page or to change the screen. Finally, the last scenario is the immediate feedback. Basically, I want to run a process and I want to notify the client what I will do. Once again, here I have a real-life application which imports reports from the iTunes developer account. Obviously, this is part of the application where you have a screen. On top, you will see that there's a button that starts the importing process. This might take long because it has to connect to the Apple server and it imports things from there. But when I hit the import button, instead of blocking the screen without any feedback, what it did was to change the color of the button. It turned orange, and then I received an image to indicate that it was loading, and the blue part notified on real time what the application was doing then. And all of this without blocking the screen. It gave me constant feedback. At the end, the button reappeared, and it told me, it gave me a report as to what it had done and what it could not do. This is good because it does not block the screen, and it gives you feedback on real time as to what it is doing. And upon conclusion, it tells you that what it did and what it did not do. Another interesting case is the progress bar or the progress indicator, which basically is valid for triggering a process that will take long and to notify the user the percentage of progress in the process. So there are many applications that use this. There are many scenario examples that we can implement. The bad news is that to solve some of these scenarios is complicated today. The good news is that doing this with GeneXus Stilo will be easy, and we will see why further on. So we saw 3 scenarios where we have needs that we cannot solve nowadays. How will we implement this within GeneXus? For this, I want to take a brief overview in terms of evolution, in terms of client-server technologies. Why do we need to mention this? Because basically, our problem was that we didn't have a way for sending messages from the server to the client on a direct basis, without the client having to request that information. So let's see where we are and where we are heading. The first stage is when the page loaded everything for the user. This was not the best situation in terms of the entire page reloads. Then in Ajax, allowed us to radically improve the user experience, since it was no longer necessary to reload or refresh the page completely. Then we had Comet, which is another technology. It is a mechanism actually that allows us to emulate a permanent connection to the server. Even though with this technology we could solve the problem we mentioned before, we didn't take this into account because it was much more a workaround rather than a technology per se to solve the problem. What happened afterwards? Why did we decide to do this? Because HTML5 Websockets appeared, and basically these WebSockets allow to turn our servers into push message servers. With WebSockets we can radically improve the UX, because with them it's possible for the server to directly connect with the client without the client having to request the data. So with this technology we will solve the problem. Another interesting thing is that WebSockets are part of the HTML5 standard, which, as announced from last event, which have been progressively adopting since GeneXus Evolution 2. So we are aiming at supporting all these scenarios from the use of HTML5 WebSockets. So in GeneXus Stilo we will start to use this technology. We saw the scenarios, we saw how we are going to develop them within GeneXus, and now I want to show how you will be able to use this from GeneXus. We have introduced new type of data which are called notifications, and basically they will allow us to send messages from the server to the client directly. Very quickly, this type of data will have 2 methods. The notify method allows to send a message from the server to a client, and the broadcast method that allows to send one message to all of my connected clients. This might be good for implementing a GeneXus chat, for example. So, with this type of data and these methods, what we do is to solve the problem that we had in terms of sending messages from the server to the client. For those of you who know about smart devices, this is basically the same as push notifications, both in iOS, Android, or BlackBerry. So we have solved how we send messages. But what do we do from that on? The client receives a notification from the server, and so what do we do? For this, we have introduced a new event in web panels, which is called onMessage, that receives a message, the parameter from the server, and based on that, we run GeneXus code, because it is more or less as any user event. But it was called onMessage. Let's assume that we have a web panel that triggers a process that processes and saves invoices. This process might take some seconds, 5, 10, 15, 30 seconds. And I would like to improve the user experience with that application. So when this process is triggered, I don't want to block the interface. So the way of not blocking the interface is to trigger a process with a submit command. You probably know them. This submit command allows to trigger something in an asynchronous way. But what's the problem of the submit command? The client never knows whether a process actually was run, whether it terminated, or what the result was. So this is very interesting in order to introduce a new type of data. So in this case, what I'm showing is, in the case of invoice.save, we save the invoice. Then it says, if it was successfully completed, then we say success equal true, or if no, success equal false. And then we have a process that is triggered, and when this is concluded, it sends a message to the client. Then, what do we do about the client? Well, in the web panel, we program the onMessage event that will receive a message per parameter from the server, and based on that message, I query. If it was successfully completed, then I trigger a message, for example, a text block that the operation completed successfully. Otherwise, I direct it to a web panel error. What do we have with this? We have a web panel that runs a process that could take long, that doesn't block the UX, and upon completion, it tells the client whether it ended successfully or not. So with very few code lines, we have solved this. Something else is that we will natively introduce the progress indicator that will be useful for our clients, so that in their applications they can include notifications and progress updates in their applications. This will be included as a user control that you will be able to use natively in GeneXus. So enough about theories. Let's now see this in motion. Let's now move to the real-time data scenario. How would this impact on this scenario? For this is an application of a company that receives and delivers orders. So here we have a grid with different orders. Each of them has a different status. And here we have client 1, client 2. So there are two instances of the same navigator that are simulating two different clients that are seeing that application from different computers, from different terminals. There's one on top and one down. So this company, one requirement of this company is that this application that will be seen from several terminals in your company also have real-time data. So employees who are in packaging need to be able to see the screen and see which are the remaining orders. All of that without having to interact with the system. And for this, I want to show you what we have. Let's now choose a first order. So we change the status. And I want you to see how in client 2, this is automatically changed. Since the client number 1 updated its status. And here you see how the status of the first order was automatically updated. Now let us see how when client starts to eliminate orders and how data are synchronized from all the applications that are interacting with this. If we eliminate orders, data are always synchronized, and once again from GeneXus this will be very easy to solve. And if we eliminate all the orders, both views remain synchronized. Now let's now move to scenario number 2, that is to say to trigger client events. For this we have 2 instances in the navigator. Now the company wants that whenever I'm left out of stock of a certain product, the user needs to receive a notification or a sound or a message, etc. For this, on the top part we have a transaction that is good for entering an order, and on the bottom we have the view that we had before. We enter a new order here. I put iPad 3. Let's enter a line for that order. Let's put 800 units because I know that I will be out of stock, and then we will confirm. Let's see what happens when a client is left out of stock of a certain product. You find a message that it says out of stock. All of this is done automatically and programmed with GeneXus. Even this is a message. It could be just anything else. Could be regression to hide, unhide controls, etc. Finally, scenario number 3, immediate feedback. In this case, what I did was to divide the screen vertically, client 1, client 2. For this scenario, I want you to imagine that a branch of my company has no connectivity. So they generate a file that 30 days afterwards comes into my application and is added. I want the user to have a good user experience so that the interface is not blocked, so that they have a nice experience with the applications as we saw before. Here we have the example of I will enter the file here containing all the orders, then I will click this button that will trigger the import process for orders with the submit command. This is triggered here. The screen is not blocked. I have a progress indicator bar that tells me what the progress is. I continue to work in the web panel, so the interface is not blocked there. And when the progress bar completes, this is automatically reflected in client 2 with all the new invoices. So what does this scenario mean? First, we had a process that was triggered that didn't block my interface. I continued to work in my application. I had an indicator as to what the progress was. Now the bar is in green. And it also told my clients who were connected that there were new data, so they would have to refresh the page. So this was another scenario that I wanted to tell you about. There are many. I believe that there are so many options for this. But what I wanted to tell you, we want you to be able to solve these type of scenarios, mainly for creating much more interactive applications with the main aim of improving the UX in our application. And something else is that we want to give you a simple, easy to use solution but based on the latest technology, which is where we want to be. I hope you like this. Thank you very much.